Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Veronica Sanchez, who is a dog trainer who specializes in training service dogs and actually now training dog trainers to train service dogs, which is a little bit meta, also very cool. Thanks so much for joining me today, Veronica.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Colleen.
So tell us a little bit about the work you do.
My focus right now is helping pet dog trainers expand their businesses to support people with disabilities who are training their own dogs for service work. I myself was a pet dog trainer who offered this as a service, and as the demand for service dogs has really grown, I found that a lot of pet dog trainers really didn't know where to go to learn to be able to offer this service themselves. And so I offer the education to help them do that.
Which is really awesome because it is a whole different kind of training. The techniques are the same, but the skills and uses are very different.
Right. There's a whole lot of different legal aspects to it, the relationship with the client, working with healthcare professionals. So the training itself, the technical skills that positive dog trainers have still apply, of course, but there's just a lot of different little ins and outs that are unique to working with service dog owner trainers.
Awesome. Okay, so can you tell me what a difficult day for a service dog trainer might look like?
So I think one of the ones, and this is especially true for pet dog trainers who are working with owner trainers who want people with disabilities who want to train their own service dogs, because this is a unique challenge that they're facing that service dog trainers that work for programs don't face. And one that I hear a lot is somebody's coming to me with a dog that is completely unsuited for service dog work. What do I do? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I remind pet dog trainers is that actually they're really skilled at addressing this, because we're doing this all the time. How many times a week are we talking to pet dog owners whose dream for their dog was, I'm going to get my dog and I'm going to go to the dog park every day with this dog. And this is going to be the dog that's going to make everyone in the dog park love my dog. We're going to go there with my coffee. It's going to be my daily routine for the foreseeable rest of the time, 10 years or 15 years of my having this dog. And then we're reframing what a reasonable goal is for this owner. And, they have, and we know this. I mean, it's really, their hearts are in this. They have envisioned their social circle around this goal, and suddenly this isn't doable. So actually, I feel like pet dog trainers are really uniquely skilled at helping people appreciate the dog that they have and helping them understand why this is something that their dog might not really enjoy. And that isn't really right for their dog. Mm-hmm. And these are conversations that pet dog trainers are great at doing. And they're difficult to have, they're challenging to have, but they're also really so important. And so I always say, this is a really important part of the job, because you're helping the owner and you're helping the dog, because you don't want this dog to end up in a role that it's going to be getting a lot of pressure. That's terrible for the relationship.
Right.
Eventually, the owner's going to discover this isn't going to work. And now my dog's a disappointment for me. So it is something that, and there's also the other aspect to this is that service dogs don't all have to do public access. Some people with disabilities really benefit from having a dog help them at home. So in some cases, it is that this dog maybe can't help them in public access, but maybe could help them at home. And so there are ways of doing that. And of course, doing it in a way that's careful and responsible. So we don't want dogs that are not appropriate for public access to end up going there.
Absolutely. So, but that's a lovely lead in to our theme for the day, which is service. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean just generally to be of service to you? How would you define that?
So what was interesting when you approached me about this and mentioned this word, it was funny for me, because I have to be honest, it's not my favorite word. It's not even my favorite word when it comes to service dogs. Mm-hmm. And
baggage with it.
Yeah, it's got like a little bit of a connotation of, I don't know, I always think like of the word servitude that sounds like the word service. And actually what's interesting is that in Europe, they call them assistance dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I use the word service dog in my program, and because it's a legal term, it's service animals, what the United States law refers to them as. So I don't want there to be confusion. But when I think of service, and whether it's service dogs or a person providing service, I really think of the word assistance, and I think of it as like help, not something where a person is sort of self-sacrificing. We're just helping. So that's
Yes.
kind of where I go with that word.
And that's a lovely distinction, because I think for a lot of pet professionals, their mission is so profound and so deeply felt that it can be a muddy line
Right.
between, am I beholden to this work? Do I have to do this work? Am I obligated?
Right.
Versus, how can I assist? What can I offer? And there's an emotional difference there. One is draining and just exhausting, and kind of you get resentful after a while. And the
Right.
other is more joyous and open and giving. Have you seen
Right.
that kind of thing with pet professionals?
Yeah. And I think that there's so many aspects of it where it gets hard for pet professionals, because we do have a sense of, we're making such a difference in this dog's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I think um, we don't sort of acknowledge the fact that we're not able to control the universe.
Yeah.
So we can give what we can give, and then just be like happy with what we gave. And sometimes the reality of it is that you might not see your impact, and you might never know that that person that you spoke to that set up a wall and said they weren't doing that, you might not know how much really sunk in, or that maybe it needed to sink in later, especially for a really difficult change. Maybe the person, for whatever reason, the feedback that you got there wasn't positive, wasn't it felt like you didn't get through, and then you question, oh my gosh, have I let this dog down? I mean, we're really putting too much, I think, on ourselves, because the reality of it is, if you think about it, like another professional who, might still be really passionate about their work. It is a matter about just thinking of it like you put forth a really good help, really great help. If that person was going to receive it at that time, that's great. Maybe they'll receive it another time, and let's go on to the next thing. As long as you've done what your best and what you needed to be doing at that moment, that was good. That was fine. And it's also okay not to always do the perfect. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes the perfect word, right? Like, we get to have our off days too. And we're human.
Yeah.
And it's, I kind of, my prior life, a lot of dog trainers had their prior life.
So many of us.
Yes, I was a public school teacher, so there was a lot of that as well. It was like, oh, and that's a lot. He was a person's child. And I'm not saying that that's not a really important thing, but we can't control everything. That's ultimately what it kind of comes down to. And if we've done our best and planted the seeds, again, I always like to think, you can think, wow, I didn't get through, or you can go the other way. I didn't see that I got through today, but maybe I got through. You don't know. Or maybe that'll sink in a week or a month, or maybe that's somebody who needs to hear it a couple different times
I
from
think
other
that's
people.
really powerful. And I want to summarize that and go a little deeper on it, because I think that's a piece that's hard for us, because we can't control the world even though we want to. And if we don't see the change happen right in the moment,
Right.
really easy to think that there wasn't an effect.
Right.
And what you're saying about, planting seeds, and that might grow later and we
Right.
may never ever know,
Right.
but it still matters that we planted that seed.
Right.
How do you think we could get better at acknowledging that element of it, that just showing up and doing what I can today, do what you can with what you have, start where you are kind of thought, and having that be enough? How could pet professionals grab that and hold that in their hearts?
I think sometimes we need to remember that we do it too. Um, so I have a lot of medical problems myself, and I health professionals, they're faced with this every day in their communications, with people. And I remember one time going into rehab and having an OT say something that I had a reaction to, that I was an occupational therapist, and I didn't want to do it. So, and I remember later on thinking, I actually had a training client later, and I remember watching the training client do the same thing to me. And I remember thinking, wow, I think I just did that to somebody. And I think we need to remember that sometimes we do it too. Sometimes we need to hear something.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, with dog training, and whether you're working with service dogs or pets, kind of the same thing, it ultimately, sometimes it's not the first time that, sometimes people need to hear things from more than one professional.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if we think about this with our own lives, how many times have we had to hear something from more than one professional? I mean, frankly, I have needed to do that for like plumbing. Okay. I mean, it's not like the first plumber wasn't reasonable or correct. I really just didn't want to hear that answer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's not even an emotionally laden topic. That's just
Right.
more like, I didn't want to. And then I might hire the third one just because it was the third one to get to my house, and it's not because the other two weren't right.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the first one was actually more highly skilled even, but it just coincidentally happened that I wasn't ready to hear it until the third one. And now I've had enough of a drainage situation that I'm gonna go for it and actually listen to the professional advice. So I think that we do it too. I think, and I think maybe sometimes thinking about situations where we do it maybe just makes it come like, you know what, I guess because we're such experts on our topic, it's really hard for us to look at this and go, how can they not see how anxious their dog is?
Yes.
I've now given them this list of stress signs, referred to them to YouTube videos. How can they still not see this? And we need to remember that, this has required a lot of expertise on our parts to get to this point. And we're expecting them to get there in the course of an hour.
I think that's really true. And I think your plumber example is funny because that's one I often use when we're talking about how can people not see that their dog is stressed.
Right.
And we see it so clearly. And the thing is that we can't unsee it. Once you know this,
right,
you know it. And that will be true of your clients too. But until they know it, they need to learn it gradually. So the example I often use is if a plumber walked into your house and walked around, how many things would make that person go, oh, I can't believe they do this with something as, no brainer as plumbing. Like how much do we need to think about plumbing? But I bet if you brought a plumber into your house, there would be opinions. I know what's going on under my kitchen sink would not make a master plumber happy. And it's that you have to take a little bit of information and learn from that and apply it to your life and then add the next layer. And sometimes with our clients, we want to put the frosting on top. Like, here's the big part, the overview, here it all is. And they're still trying to get their layers and figure it out.
Right. Right. I think it's hard because we're so passionate too, that we think everybody should be.
Yeah.
you know, and I know that, you know, I'm sure that the plumber would wonder, you know, why we don't make this more of a priority, because our, it's the pipes to our home
Yeah.
and the water source. But you know, I'm sure they would think, oh my gosh, you know, why do they not, you know? But again, I think we need to, I do think that that's a large part of it. I think that and you know, I think it's hard to, because we do see the animal in need, you know, and of course, so we're like, oh, we want to fix that right away
Yeah.
for obvious reasons.
Because they're alive and our plumbing is not alive. So
Right.
a pipe that is not happy doesn't really bother most of us, but a dog that is unhappy or a cat that is suffering, that's a problem.
Right. Right. So it just adds to the emotional intensity of the situation. But we also, I mean, like I said, we do this sometimes when it's important too, and we ourselves do this. Like, I know
absolutely.
we do this all the time. So sometimes I think it helps to become aware that we do this in other situations ourselves, and then we can maybe step back a little bit. But I also think that just I think also, I know for myself as a trainer, like like I mentioned, my first career was public school teaching, and I did this for fun. Like I started training. It was a passion. It was a hobby of mine. And when it became a career, then what's your downtime? What's your hobby? When your hobby, you know, there's like almost nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
Right? Because now it's like it's like dogs round the clock. And so it was hard because I needed to find, and that's something that I've done, it worked hard to, is to find other things.
Yes. And that is an area that so many pet professionals struggle with. Like when we talk about what do you love that is unrelated to animals,
Right.
and how much time do you spend doing it, there are an incredible number of people who no longer have a passion. They have things they used to do, but it's tough to find the balance, and it's such a great restorative thing for us to do that,
Right.
to have interests other than animals.
Right. I think it's essential. I think we need to be able to take our brains away from that, because a lot of us, if we train for a hobby and now we're also doing that on a weekend, and we're working, you know, we need to be able to have something else to talk about and also just think about. I think for our brains need a break.
Yeah. So let's tie that back to the word service here. In what ways does having that external hobby or interest benefit you? How does it serve you to have these other interests?
And I think that we should do it for ourselves, for our own well-being, but I actually think it can make us better at our jobs. So I think if we're thinking of it as, if we are so down that rabbit hole where everything we want to do it to benefit the dogs that we work with, I think that it benefits the dogs that we work with. I think it gives us an opportunity to connect with the client, because our client isn't only doing this. So then having something else helps us step back a little bit, because in our interactions of our other hobby or other interests, we'll be talking to people who don't only, you know, eat, breathe, dream dog. So it's an opportunity to, you know, step back a little bit and then come in feeling refreshed, come in with a little bit more of a deep breath. I know sometimes with my hobby, one of my hobbies is gardening. And sometimes I'd come up with funky gardening analogies for my clients who would garden. It just gives us a different little opportunity there to do that as well.
Yeah.
You know, as we're thinking about this too, when I think too about trainers who work with service dog clients specifically, I think that there's an additional intensity of the importance of thinking of the person's health and the dog that adds even more of a reason for that trainer to be taking a step back and making sure they're taking care of themselves and keeping perspective and realizing they don't control the universe.
Tell me a little bit more about that. I think I know where you're going, but I think there's something really rich here.
So there's a lot put on the dogs for service dogs. I mean, right now, when when people think of service dogs, they're kind of thinking in two lands of extremes. Either they're thinking about people passing their dog off as a pet, or they're thinking about these dogs. And one of the things that's they're they talk about how much of an impact they put on the life of the person that they're being trained to help.
Mm-hmm.
There's one of the things that I know I talk to my students about is, like, as much as possible, sort of keeping things light, because we're putting so much pressure on the dog. And part of this is, it's not to diminish the impact that dogs can have on people with disabilities. And I say this as a person with a disability who has benefit from a service dog. Yes, they're very, very valuable. But ultimately, there are also very real other things that are really important too in my healthcare and well-being, like medical treatments, prescriptions, wheelchairs. There's other things. So having a little bit of perspective and taking, a deep breath on this, and realizing that, yes, service dog, now if you're a trainer helping this person train their own dog for service work, you can really be feeling like you're taking a lot on. You're like, not only do I have to keep this dog happy, but this person's healthcare needs are now being helped by this dog. And I think that it's important to take a deep breath and view what you're doing there and saying, you know what, I'm helping this owner trainer. They've decided that they wanted to train their own dog for service work. And that is something that they have responsibility for. I mean, ultimately, our clients are the ones in control. Mm-hmm. And, they've decided to make these choices, and this is what